100, a show that started off with a great concept and somewhat interesting characters, but ended up losing its way with each passing season, some great, some questionable, with some fans praising its early seasons, while others, like me, just kind of forgot about it. Here's a fun tip for your 100 viewing experience. Take a shot every time characters say, "I'm doing this for my people." I remember the show's first season, the excitement and anticipation I had. I was obsessed with the show. If I wasn't on Game of Thrones, Pretty Little Liars, the originals, I was watching The 100 and I was convinced it was one of the best shows ever. I was young, okay? I didn't know any better. Looking back at it now, I've got to be honest, it's kind of embarrassing. Season 1 began airing in 2014. It follows our main character, Clark Griffin, who is sent to a post-apocalyptic Earth with 99 other juvenile delinquents. They must learn to survive in this new world where they are the only signs of life, at least to their knowledge. One of the main questions raised by the first season was how the characters would survive in a world that had been destroyed by nuclear war. The show tackled this question head-on, showing the characters struggling to find food, water, and shelter. The characters were forced to make difficult decisions throughout and often had to choose between doing what was right and what would ensure their survival. The real treasure of the show was the introduction of the Grounders, descendants of survivors who remained on Earth after the apocalypse. They're like a mix of tribal community meets wolf pack. They're all about honor and tradition and were just all around pretty awesome. However, season 1 did have its faults. For example, some critics found some of the acting a bit questionable, and you could sort of tell the show was still finding its footing from the unnecessary love triangles and other random plot points never to be touched on again. Though it never found mainstream success, the first season premiered to moderate and mixed reviews. A rocky start for sure, however, it did provide a gripping and intense viewing experience that left fans eager for more. While season 1 was essentially a survival game against the wilderness and hostile natives, the series plunged into science fiction in season 2. The second season, to most, including myself, was regarded as the show's peak, overcoming most of its season 1 growing pains. The season was well received by fans and critics alike, owing to its violent action, thought-provoking themes, and character development. It picks up where the first season left off, with the people from the Ark and the Grounders facing off against the Mountain Men. The season explored the complexities of these different groups and their relationships with one another, as well as the lengths to which they're willing to go to protect their own. One of the key themes from this season was the idea of leadership, as Clark and Bellamy find themselves thrust into positions of power, exploring how they navigate leadership, loss, and forgiveness, how they weigh the costs of war against their relentless drive to protect their people, how they constantly have to bear the weight of making decisions that no one else wants to make. It makes for interesting and compelling television, but for the love of God, aren't they supposed to be just kids? Teenagers specifically, but still, they're kids. That is extremely unrealistic responsibility for a teenager. This season also introduced us to one of its best villains in Dante Wallace, the leader of the Mountain Men living in Mount Weather. At first, Dante doesn't seem like a typical villain. He's intelligent, charismatic, and genuinely believes he's in the right. However, as the season progresses, we begin to see the horrific side of his leadership. Dante is not a one-dimensional character. He's flawed, he's conflicted, and is constantly grappling with the morality of his actions. On the one hand, he genuinely cares about the people in his care, and he's doing everything he can to keep them safe, while on the other hand, we see him making some pretty brutal decisions, like using the Grounders as a source of blood for the survival of his people, viewing them as savages as justification for his actions. Finally, I think one of the most interesting things about Dante as a villain is the fact that he's not entirely irredeemable. There are moments when we see his conscience kicking in and he starts to question whether or not he's doing the right thing. We see him reach out to Lincoln when he was being held captive, and we also see him struggling with the realization that his people have been systematically killing the Grounders. All this made him a fascinating character, as you couldn't really root for him, but you couldn't entirely hate him as well. I think one of the highlights and best aspects of this season was the character dynamic and relationship between Clark and Lexa. What made it so interesting was the conflicting nature of their positions as leaders. Lexa was the commander of the Grounders, while Clark was essentially the Katniss Everdeen of the Sky People. Clark and Lexa find themselves representing opposing ideologies. Lexa believed in blood must have blood, which means that any aggression must be avenged in kind. On the other hand, Clark is more pragmatic, seeking to find peaceful solutions that don't involve bloodshed. These conflicting ideas put Clark and Lexa at odds with each other, creating a great source of tension between them. But despite their disagreements, there's a certain level of mutual respect and even admiration for each other's leadership qualities, each recognizing the other's intelligence, strength, and determination. It's an interesting dynamic that creates a complex on-screen relationship that is fascinating to watch. Over time, as they work together to find a solution to the conflict between their two groups, they begin to develop a connection. A slow burn that takes time, is well crafted, and their relationship deepened audiences' investment in the show. In that respect, a love story ended up being crucial to the season's success and the show until it wasn't and bit them in the ass in season 3. Most people will agree that season 3 was when things started to get a bit shaky. The show got bogged down in lengthy, complicated storylines that many viewers felt was slowing down the plot's pacing. The season introduced a new antagonist in Allie and focused on her for the most part of the season. Some fans felt like it stagnated the character's plot lines and development and took away from the show's core themes of survival and leadership, etc. While most people may not have liked the Allie plotlines, I remember finding it quite enjoyable. Allie was an AI who had control of the characters' minds. She lured her victims with the City of Light, a virtual reality she created, promising an escape from the pain and suffering of the real world. This led to some interesting philosophical questions about the nature of reality and what it means to be human. However, this season had the show's first plot controversy, and it was big. In season 3's 13th episode, Lexa is unexpectedly, fatally shot by a stray bullet that was meant to kill Clark. No, you definitely heard that right. Lexa, the commander of the Grounders, a character that played an integral part in season 2's success, a character that had developed a near perfect relationship with our protagonist and great character development, instantly died out of nowhere from a stray bullet. To say fans of the show were pissed is an understatement. Hell, even I was confused. A lot of fans pointed out that Lexa's death was not only unnecessary, but also that it played into a trope known as bury your gays, which refers to the tendency by TV shows and movies to have LGBTQ+ characters die tragically. Fans also criticized the way they went about her death. We can all agree it wasn't a proper send-off, especially for a fan favorite like Lexa. I get that the show was going for the ruthless, Game of Thrones-esque approach where no character is safe, but for heaven's sake, a stray bullet? Really? Her death could have been handled better. The outrage got so bad, the showrunner Jason Rothenberg later addressed the controversy, citing Lex's death as his biggest regret on the series, stating that he never intended for Lex's death to be seen as commentary on LGBTQ+ representation in media, and that he wished he could get it back and do things differently. Sure, buddy, but it doesn't matter what your intentions are. People are going to identify with your characters, whether you intend for it or not. He should have been aware of that possibility. Despite Rothenberg's explanation, the impact Lexa's death had was very significant. I mean, there was a whole convention surrounding Clark and Lexa's relationship. Klexicon, I think it was called, named after the pair. What he should have, could have, or would have done is irrelevant. What's done is done. While Lex's death was definitely an upset, it definitely showcased the power that a well-written and well-acted character can have in captivating audiences. Alicia's portrayal of Lexa was near perfect and inimitable. Despite its flaws, including the show's pacing at times, certain underdeveloped storylines such as the poorly handled depiction of Bellamy, whose decision to help Pike wasn't properly motivated, and of course the massive upset that was Lex's death, it wasn't enough to kill the show, especially among its die-hard fans. At the very least, we got Luna. That was enough to get me to continue with the show anyway. Yeah, they killed her too. Season 3 was a rocky one to say the least, but things got slightly better in season 4. It revolved around a looming apocalypse. Again, with nuclear reactors melting down and the world coming to an end. again. Our sky people find out and the kids assemble on a mission to save humanity. Season 4 tried to get back on track by returning to its roots with the main premise of the show, survival. This storyline to me felt repetitive, and the introduction of another apocalypse felt like an unnecessary plot device. There were some notable moments though, like Octavia's transformation. At the start of the season, she was still grieving the loss of Lincoln, but over the course of the season, she became a fierce warrior known as Blood Reina. Clark and Luna's journey was cool, and Bellamy's leadership after Clark was out of commission was interesting as well. The audiences, however, had a fairly positive reception of the season, with fans praising the action-packed sequences and emotional moments. Some fans even likened it to its former glory in season 2. The plot was a bit better than season 3, which was perceived as boring by some. The ending was engaging enough to lure the fans to want to watch season 5. By that point, it was clear the show was losing steam. This is where its problems started to truly become apparent. While some viewers absolutely loved it, others criticized it for its convoluted plot and character shifts, like how Clark's mother-daughter relationship with Maddie saw her making some questionable decisions. Oh, and fans didn't like Maddie either. The time jump felt awkward and was a creative risk that made it hard for some fans to connect with the characters and their new roles. The introduction of the new villains of the season with the mining ship and its prisoners was also a bit confusing. While the idea of new characters and conflicts can be interesting, the execution left a lot to be desired. The prisoners' introduction seemed rushed, and their motivations and alliances were often unclear. I mean, did anyone care about these people? I know I didn't, except for Dioza. She was okay, I guess. This season had too much going on, with multiple factions and storylines that often felt disconnected, and the time jump really made things harder to follow, considering the show didn't do enough to clarify what happened during the 6-year gap. There's less showing and more telling, and I can understand how this was a bit jarring for viewers who were invested in the characters before Prime Fire. The season also suffered from pacing issues, with some episodes feeling like filler and others trying to cram too much into 1 hour. This made it difficult to keep track of what was happening and why it even mattered. While putting this together, I couldn't even remember half of what happened in the season. I had to read the recap somewhere online, and I was still confused. And the ending? Yeah. So our characters are instantly faced with an impending apocalyptic event. Again! Oh boy. So they go off to space, with their only option for survival being Cairo sleep. I already don't like where this is going. They wake up 125 years later on course to another planet because things didn't go to plan, and Earth is now completely uninhabitable. As I'm sure you've noticed, the show obviously follows a trend. Earth faces destruction, people flee to survive, something goes wrong, survivors return, there's tension and war, another apocalyptic threat arises, people flee to survive, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. At this point, they should have just wrapped things up in season 4, maybe even season 2, and ended on a high note because things went downhill from here. Season 6 tried yet again to get back to what made the show great in the first place, with a renewed focus on its original theme, survival. In this season, our characters arrive on a new planet 125 years later, simply named Planet Alpha or Sanctum by its inhabitants. Can I just say, isn't it weirdly convenient that they always manage to land near civilizations every time they're coming from space? Planets are huge. I mean, what are the odds? To make matters worse, the characters are faced with the same problems as they did in previous seasons. It's basically season 1 all over again, but instead of the awesome grounders, we get primes and the children of Gabriel? Now, this would be interesting if the characters actually approached things differently and showed that they actually learned from their past mistakes and experiences with the grounders. But no, we can't have that. They traveled 125 years just to repeat the same mistakes and face the same problems all over again. What even was the point of this season? It's very disconnected, and just like season 5, there's too much going on. She had Heda and Maddie, Josephine and Clark, the new Kane, Red Sun, Dioza and Octavia, all these plot lines in less than 22 episodes, and most have nothing to do with each other. The whole tone felt like it had shifted. We went from the survival, greedy, and gore-ridden tones of Sky Crew vs. Grounders to makeshift gods. I hated the whole plot about the Primes. I know it was popular with the fans, but nah, their whole shtick was insufferable to me. So there you have it. Season 6, a rushed, convoluted, disconnected, and unfocused mess. Apparently, it gets worse. To say the 7th and final season of The 100 left much to be desired would be an understatement. I mean, what went wrong? No, seriously, what really happened? Because I didn't watch it. Yeah, I pretty much tapped out after season 6. I'm guessing the story continues from season 6, considering all the plot lines left unexplored. From what I've heard, things start to get a bit bonkers. Apparently, they introduced time travel and portals? That is, they do a complete 180 from sci-fi to fantasy and magic. I swear, if season 5 was the smoke and 6 the fire, then season 7 is the blazing inferno in the depths of hell, because what the hell? Going off of its reception, it looks as though viewers had mixed feelings, as with any season finale of a show. While some praised it for the simple fact that they were fans, the season didn't do much to improve the overall dissatisfaction that fans felt with its new direction. The biggest controversy to crop up from the season, though, has to be Bellamy's death. So it seems that Rothenberg, not having learned his lesson from Lexa, decided to have Clark kill Bellamy to save her adopted daughter that nobody likes. Viewers were pissed. I mean furious. Absolutely enraged. Which isn't surprising because Bellamy was a huge fan favorite, a lead on the show for 7 years, and they offed him in a mere 11-second death scene that came out of nowhere. It made Lexa seem more respectful, and that's a really low bar in and of itself. It truly was a disappointing end to a show that once captivated audiences, at least the few that tuned in enough to care. So there you have it. It's safe to say the show's never really cracked the mainstream and saw a steady decline in popularity due to various reasons, ranging from inconsistent plots and the constant shift in themes. The show felt all over the place and never felt like it had a clear direction. While The 100 had its far and in-between moments of brilliance, it became bogged down in overly complicated storylines and failed to deliver on its core premise. So, did you stick with The 100 until the end, or did you lose interest somewhere along the way? With its weak final season, I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't.